What's happening, guys? Happy Wednesday, and welcome to the Dynasty WarZone, the People's Dynasty Podcast. Hot Take Month. Gonna continue tonight. We're gonna do some more QB hot takes, but there is no Jerry on this week's show. But I am not flying alone, as my good co-host Jerry is out helping his lovely wife relocate across the country to new digs. I'm with guest, not flying solo. Tonight's guest is Theo Gremminger, and Theo is a high stakes fantasy football player. He was the NFFC Silver Bullet runner up in 2019, the NFFC number one contender combined standings in 2019. He is the co-host of the GOAT District podcast and a content contributor at Roto Underworld and Player Profiler. You can follow him on Twitter at the OG Fantasy. Theo, my friend, welcome back to the Dynasty WarZone. That's quite a bio, by the way.
I appreciate the intro, and I'm stoked to be back on the WarZone. I love competing against you guys in Dynasty leagues, and I'm a big fan of the WarZone. I listen to it weekly, so I'm stoked. When you said I can fill in for a great co-host like Jerry, I said I'm absolutely stepping in those shoes tonight.
Well, I'm speaking on behalf of Jerry as someone who's probably in their permanent residence until my son graduates high school. I do not miss those moving days. I have not moved in many years. I think we lived in this house for 7 years, and it's like 100 degrees here in the Midwest right now as we're moving. And Jerry's moving from parts unknown in Michigan. Well, it's actually 8 Mile if you've been a long-time listener to the show. And he's moving to parts unknown in Iowa, but it's like 99 degrees across the Midwest. So could you imagine moving in this ridiculous heat?
It's awful. I mean, I hate moving to begin with, and if you add that kind of heat, it just makes it even more stressful. And it just you're exhausted when it's all over, and it kind of never ends. You got the boxes sitting around the house. It's tough. Moving is tough.
It is because, you get a little help with your friends packing everything up in this case, but you're moving to a brand new city, and it's just you and the missus unpacking in this case. So that's what Jerry's up to. Hoping to have him back next week on the show. We'll be doing some running back hot takes. Theo and I are going to jump into some quarterback hot takes here in a second. But man, what have you been up to? I always retweet you. Again, his Twitter handle is at the OG Fantasy. And I will always retweet Theo's stuff. It's the Player Profiler, Roto Underworld content that I consume. Big fan of Theo and his work, and listen to the podcast with you and JD and Dan. But you tell us what you got going on.
Yeah, so I just came out with a tight end targets article. It's up on the site, and then I'm working on now is a late, you could call it a late RB targets article, but more of a guide if you go hero RB or zero RB, kind of the guys you should be targeting. And then, we're recording twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week on the GOAT District podcast. These guys on the WarZone have been guests multiple times. We have right now we're hitting the best ball shows and a lot of redraft content, mixing in some Dynasty, pretty much, up until a couple weeks ago, it was all Dynasty. So we're mixing it up and we're bringing on great guests, and give us a listen.
Yeah, for sure. Just search GOAT District Pod. You can find it on YouTube, great YouTube channel. You can see our buddies JD and Dan, both former guests here on the show. We need to get those guys back on. Speaking of traveling, I saw our boy Dan going across country with his daughter. So, make sure to check these guys out. Great YouTube channel, a great watch. So check those guys out. And then if you're into reading articles, it's really one of the last of the articles that I actually make time to read. Theo's a good writer. I don't want to put him over too strong. He does a good job with his content. So if you're looking for some of that, make sure to check him out everywhere. So Theo, you do know we do a little segment as a loyal listener to the Dynasty WarZone. We do a little segment here on the show. We like to call it Good People, Bad Tweets. Are you familiar?
I love it.
So I do have one for us this week, and I want to make sure that, as always, the disclaimer of Good People, Bad Tweets is it's not like a personal thing. I actually follow this person. He has a lot of good content. He does baseball. He does football. It's frank Amarante. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's at FAMMIRANTETFJ. Just search Frank AMMIRANTE. You'll find him. Good follow if you're into sports, dynasty, fantasy. But on this particular take, I think he's a good person with a bad tweet. Here we go. So Baker Mayfield would have a career year passing to DJ Moore and Christian McCaffrey. The Panthers would immediately become the clear-cut second best team in the NFC South. Make it happen. Now, before I throw it to you, Theo, I'm just going to do this.
Let me tell you a couple of three things.
Let me tell you a couple of three things about this tweet and why I find it wrong. First of all, one of my hot takes last week was that I do think Baker lands on a new team, and I do think Baker has a very good season. But where I think this is a bad tweet is that it's not the Carolina Panthers. Even if they got Baker Mayfield, they're not going to be the second best team in the NFC South. I think the best team in the NFC South is clearly the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I think if you're going total roster, agnostic of the QB, get the QB out of there and look at the other 21 starters, it's clearly the New Orleans Saints. They've added the Honey Badger, they've added Jarvis Landry, they've added Chris Olave, they've added everywhere on that team. And I think Jameis Winston at this point in his career is a much better quarterback. I mean, look at the New Orleans Saints last year. So they wouldn't be the second best team. And wouldn't this be going against the plan? Isn't the whole point of keeping Sam Darnold and drafting the Sam Howell late? Was it Sam Howell?
Yeah. No, it was Corral.
Matt Corral. Sam Howell went to Washington. I got those two confused there. But wasn't the point of taking Corral late the point of, hey, we're going to give Sam 6-8 games. This thing's probably going to go sideways. We want it to go sideways because there's a Vegas prop right now that the number of QBs in the first round next year is 5.5. I went through and did some mock draft research. If you're Carolina, you want to get the QB of the future in next year's draft. You want to suck this year. This is the program. And Baker does not help that. Does going 7-9 in the NFC, does it do anything for you? Does it help the long-term plan or does it help the short-term plan? Where I agree with Frank is that, yes, Baker would have a career year with Christian McCaffrey, with DJ Moore, with Robbie Anderson, with Tommy Tremble, with a pretty good ensemble offensive cast. They improved the offensive line with their draft pick. But I think it's a bad tweet in that that's not the plan for the Carolina Panthers. They want to bomb. They want to bottom out. They want to get that rookie QB on a rookie deal, be able to add to the young pieces they've already got, and spend some money in free agency. At least that's what I thought when I read Frank's tweet. What are your couple of 2-3 things now that I've had mine?
No, I would agree with that. I mean, it doesn't make sense for them to move in that direction. I think they'd want 5+ years out of Bryce Young, a lot more than 5 months out of Baker Mayfield. And I think he's kind of a purgatory player in the sense that he's not going to make them elite, and he's going to keep them kind of just good enough to miss out on the top tier of quarterbacks. So it would be a counterproductive move. I completely agree with you on that.
Yeah, it's just I don't want to put words in his mouth, but it almost feels like someone who's been a Baker fan caping up for their boy one last time. And no one has been harder on Baker to start his career. And by the way, no one in the dynasty space was more right than me on Baker early in his dynasty career. But I'm starting to see value. Like I said, he is someone that I really see. I know people don't believe this, but I think if Deshaun Watson gets suspended, I've said this before, isn't it in both parties' best interest for Baker just to play for Cleveland? Rehab your image. The only reason why Baker is not more sought after in the market is because of his image. It's not that he's not talented. He's clearly one of the 32 best QBs in the world. That's not why he doesn't have a job. So wouldn't it go a long way to, showing maturity, saying, hey, I'm going to help the team. I understand I'm not the long-term answer here. You have a great 2022, and then in turn, Cleveland lets you walk in free agency next year, and you get to pick wherever you want to go as the cap continues to go up. I think that would be a win-win. I am not going to be at all surprised if Baker is the 2022 answer for Cleveland.
Yeah, I mean, it makes most sense for them to kind of kiss and make up, even if it's, Watson only suspended for, 6-8 games. You still want to have Baker start those games. And, I think that for him to get that next job, he would have a chance this year to have a winning record on a pretty strong roster. I think that would go a long way. And like I agree with you, I think it would show maturity for him to kind of kiss and make up after such an awkward situation.
Just simply walk to a podium and say, hey, listen, this has been the strangest, 6 months, 9 months of my life. But you know what? In the best interest of all the parties involved, including the other 52 guys in that locker room, we've got a playoff caliber roster here. We're going to make one last run of it, kind of like Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers. They posted the last dance, last year. This is the last dance in Cleveland. Then if you're Baker, you can go out and resurrect your career. But I don't think if you're Seattle, if you're Carolina, if you're a team like that you go out and get Baker. I think a team that gets Baker is if you lose a QB in the preseason. It happens every year. Someone, holds out, or there's a lot of situations where I could see Baker get traded if he doesn't make up in Cleveland. If you're a bad team, why force it's kind of like Dynasty. That's what we do, right? Why are you making trades right now for older assets that aren't going to make you a championship contender, that's just going to make your future draft picks less valuable and not be able to get the players that will get you over the hump long term? That's kind of how I read all of this.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. And I have listened to your takes on Baker, though. I do think he's gotten to a point where he's kind of underrated in Dynasty. I mean, at the end of the day, he's definitely an NFL starting quarterback, whether we like him, being a winning NFL starting quarterback or a guy who's really impactful on our fantasy teams. That remains to be seen. But in terms of should he start for an NFL team? Absolutely. And I think like you've recommended to go get him in Superflex. I think that's a great recommendation to kind of kick the tires now when he's kind of unattached.
And you know what? That was one of my hot takes last week. And all this weaves back into the Patreon, which Good People, Bad Tweets is brought to you by. It's brought to you by our Patreon. Baker Mayfield, along with the rookies next year, are going to displace at least 5 to 6 starting quarterbacks in the NFL. So I just recorded an episode of that for our patrons. I'm going to upload that probably tomorrow morning. And that's just one of the things that we do over at Patreon. We have a great group chat. We just brought in a couple of new patrons. Brought in a gentleman named Colin. He's already ruling the roost in the group chat. That's been the part that he loves. Been doing some one-on-one stuff with a new patron named Daniel. And that's been great for he and I. And that's everything that we do over at patreon.com/Dynasty WarZone. If you're looking for one-on-one advice, if you're looking for a group chat to, get that collective IQ, that wisdom of crowds, not just from me and Jerry, but all the content creators at the DWZ, as well as dozens and dozens and dozens of your fellow Dynasty gamer. And if that's what you're looking for and you're looking for a value, head over there. It's patreon.com/Dynasty WarZone. Check it out and see how we can help you and add to your Dynasty experience. But Theo, I'm ready to talk more about the QB position. So I did some hot takes last week. We just talked about Baker. Now, what do you think about me saying that Baker is going to land a job, whether it's in Cleveland or somewhere else, and he is going to be a top 16-ish fantasy QB for 2022? You play a lot of best ball. What are you seeing with Baker out there, and what do you think about that take? Because you already mentioned my Dynasty take that I'm buying.
16, you would need a good landing spot. I think that if he lands back in Cleveland, I don't necessarily, I will take the under on that, but I would take the over on certain situations. Like you said, it could be an unforeseen situation. So I would say that him returning value is a good bet, but I'm going to take the under on 16.
Okay, that's fair. I just see him really playing well, and that's kind of been his career path. Up until last year, he was hurt. He had the shoulder injury. I think he missed a game and a half, if I remember correctly. Very limited in others. And I think that I'm not asking him to be top 10, But I think if we look back on Baker Mayfield in 3 years and he has a Kirk Cousins-esque career arc where he winds up on a second team, maybe a more well-ran team. I know Josh Hermsmeyer recently called the Cleveland Browns fake sharp. You know, we like to laud Andrew Berry, and before that, Sashi Brown, and the Cleveland Browns are sharp. He called them fake sharp, and I don't think I could agree more. I think Cleveland, I think we want Cleveland to be sharp. I think we want Cleveland to be good. I just don't think it's a good organization. I don't think it's well ran, and I think that starts at the top with Jimmy Haslam. I think you could bring in good people, but ultimately when you handcuff those good people like Andrew Berry and you force them to, you know, give guaranteed contracts to a guy with the baggage of a Deshaun Watson, who I like as a fantasy option, not as a person, goes without saying. But when you handcuff those good people, it makes for a poorly run organization. And would it shock me as a Colts fan if on the wheel of quarterback, if the 2023 version for the Colts is Baker Mayfield? It would not. So, you know, if he picks an organization like the Colts, and there could be others. I don't want to give away the entire patron podcast that I've put together, but that was my take on Baker. But enough about my take and rehashing one from last week. What about one of your hot takes? You know, you're a big best ball player, and I don't say that tongue in cheek. Theo plays some super high level, super high entry fee. He's got it like that. That's right. You know, he's very in tune to what's going on with seasonal and dynasty. So give us that hot take. Give us your first hot take that you're hanging your hat on for 2022.
So I think one of the big quarterback winners based on ADP right now will end up being Derek Carr. I think Derek Carr is in a fantastic situation. Last year, he was fifth in passing yards in the league. He was fifth in deep passes over 50 yards. He had a career high of 4,800 yards passing. Now he gets a new head coach. They've done everything that they can to try to improve that offense. They got Devontae Adams. They re-signed Hunter Renfrow. They extended him. And I think that everything's kind of shaping up for them to let Carr loose. I think McDaniels is coming from a run-heavy system in New England. It's his second chance as a head coach in the league. I think that he's going to try to put his stamp on this offense, make them a lot more balanced, an aggressive passing attack. And I think Carr could really, really pay off where he's going. Right now, he's quarterback 14, right about quarterback 14, quarterback 15 in best ball. I think that he's got a chance to finish as like on the higher range, quarterback 6-ish. I think he could really, really have a career year. And I think the Raiders could be a lot of fun on offense. I think underrated Kenyon Drake being healthy will give him another option out of the backfield. I think they'll utilize him as a receiver. And obviously he's got Darren Waller. So they're loaded. And I think that Carr is really, really going to have a great year.
Well, the one thing that I wanted to say is I have been, as you listen to the show and our loyal listeners as well as new time listeners, our loyal listeners would tell you I've been a proponent of Derek Carr for a long time. I've always been a Derek Carr guy. I think he's more talented than people think. I think he's boring. I think that he is a guy, you know, whatever you're into is into, but you know, he's openly religious. I think that turns some people off. I think there's a lot about Derek Carr, the person, but I thought that I was on him heavy, and the addition of Devontae Adams, the re-signing of Waller, the re-signing of Renfrow, the bringing in of Josh, I thought it would actually help his dynasty ADP. Now, I'm using Fantasy Pros. Where do you think Derek Carr's ranking from 1 to whatever, we'll call 40, because there's some backup QBs worth rostering in dynasty. Where do you think Derek Carr is going in a dynasty ADP range per Fantasy Pros ADP data?
That's a tough one because I think that he would be definitely behind a number of those younger quarterbacks. I would say he's probably closer to quarterback 20 in Dynasty ADP right now.
You know, this is why we bring guys like Theo on. I mean, he is good.
But the cream will rise to the top. Oh, yeah.
Per Fantasy Pros ADP data for Dynasty, Derek Carr is QB 20. And that's criminal. He's 31 years old. He's a guy that, we're going to kind of ball the gambling stuff that we do this season into our redraft show. We're going to kind of do like a Wednesday show, more on that to come later. But he's the kind of guy that if you're looking for a long shot MVP type candidate and you want good odds on the money, I mean, he was having an MVP campaign a couple of years ago, the year that he broke his ankle in a game against my Colts. And he's only 31 years old. If you get Derek Carr as your QB2 in a Superflex startup, you have done tremendous for yourself. I love your take on Derek Carr. I'm a big Derek Carr guy. And we see this one eye to eye. So I'm going to give you a new hot take that I didn't cover last week. So earlier I referenced the Patreon pod that I did about the 5 incoming rookie QBs, potential first-round QBs in 2022, as well as Baker being a free agent and who they'll displace. I'll tell you a guy that I truly do not believe gets displaced because I think he has a pretty good year, and that's Davis Mills. I think Davis Mills of the Houston Texans. Now, if they finish like the 101 or the 102, it would be very hard for them to pass up a CJ Stroud or a Bryce Young in favor of a Davis Mills. But I don't think they're going to be that bad. I think they could potentially split with the Titans and the Jags and maybe even the Colts, although the Colts have historically have had the Texans number. But I think with a veteran head coach and Lovie Smith, decent weapons around, I know people hate Marlon Mack and want to see Dameon Pierce get all the work there in the backfield, but Marlon Mack's a pro. Brandon Cook's a pro. They've invested a little bit. And I think Lovie Smith is good for some wins. So this is a team that wins 5-6 games, maybe 7 on the high end if things break right. They've got a pretty easy schedule. So, and I think Davis Mills could do some things. And I think this coaching staff and this front office could look and say, hey, do we want to go one more draft class? We still have Cleveland's draft pick this year. Do they want to go the Philadelphia Eagles route and maybe give Davis Mills another full season after his rookie year? Because this the similar career path, different type quarterback than Jalen Hurts. He got a partial season as a rookie due to some poor play injury issues in front of him. He's going to get all of his sophomore year, and I think he'll get his junior year, his third year in the NFL. And that makes Davis Mills kind of a sneaky buy for me in Dynasty. I think if I was going to angle shoot another GM, I'd say, listen, go look at these over and under props. There's going to be up to five, quarterbacks drafted in the first round. How does Davis Mills avoid it? I think Davis Mills is a guy that I still like. So for me, I'm a Davis Mills guy. I think he'll be a serviceable QB2. And I've referenced this stat many times on the show. Only one QB from week 12, one rookie QB from week 12 through week 18 scored more fantasy points than Davis Mills last year, and that was Zach Wilson. So a guy who could be helpful, and I think he'll have sneaky long-term value. Where do you stand on that take, and where do you stand with Davis Mills?
I actually like that take a lot. I took Davis Mills actually this week as a QB3 in a Superflex startup, and I think that he's one of these guys that people are just thinking is going to get replaced, but I think he flashed. I think they like him enough. I like getting Lovie Smith. I think that he's kind of like a head coach that will provide a great deal of stability there. He already showed a great chemistry with Brandon Cooks. He had like 27% targeting Brandon Cooks. Brandon Cooks is back. Brandon Cooks is healthy. I like the draft pick of Mechie. I think once Mechie gets healthy, I think Mechie's going to help that offense. He can fly. So I think that Mills is sneaky this year, and I agree with you. I don't think they're going to be just awful. I think that they're going to be just good enough to maybe, again, avoid those top 5, picks. Because those guys like Stroud and Young, any way you cut it, they're going off the board, with the top 3 picks. So I think that, if you kind of avoid those tier of guys, I think that Mills has a great chance to keep his job next year.
Well, good. I'm glad we're on the same page there. I've really come around on him, and the other guys in this draft class that I've done a little. This should impress all of you Devy and college football fans because I've done more research on this than I normally do at this time into upcoming class. That's what my boy Dallas over at the Rookie Rundown's for. And, you've got Will Levis or Levi's. I don't know. I don't even know how to pronounce the guy's name, but I know who he is out of Kentucky. You got Anthony Richardson out of Florida. And then Cameron Ward out of Washington State are some of the guys that I've done very little bit of research into. But if it's not Stroud or Young, I don't know how they would be super eager to replace Davis Mills. So that was my second hot take. Give us another one of yours.
So my hot take is Lamar Jackson is the league winner. If we're looking for a league-winning quarterback, I'm going on Lamar Jackson. I think that there will be an extension before the season. I think if you talk to, people close to the situation in Baltimore, some people are maybe a little less optimistic than me. But I think, the fact that it seems like it's make or break time for Baltimore. They really, really need to make a push with Lamar. Last year, they had issues. He only played 12 games. But I think that they're really shaping up to look a lot more like they did in 2019, where Lamar had his career year, where they're going to go back to a run-heavy approach. I think getting Dobbins and Edwards healthy is going to help that entire offense. We've already seen him have a 1,200-yard rushing season. I think he can reach that level, somewhere in that, 1,100-plus rushing yards. And get between his 2019 and his 2020 seasons in terms of passing touchdowns. We've seen him have a 36-touchdown season, a 26-touchdown season. I love how Mark Andrews and him have a chemistry, and I think Rashad Bateman could take this offense to another level. I think he could be a really, really, really productive player for Lamar Jackson. So for me, I know it's a little bold, but he's quarterback 4 right now. And I'm going to take an optimistic approach with Baltimore, going back to letting Lamar do his thing. This is our chance to kind of, get back in that, top of the AFC and go for it. And I think it's also shaping up to be a potential shootouts with Cincinnati. The division is not quite as scary with no Deshaun Watson, if we're projecting that. And a Pittsburgh with Mitch could be interesting, but it's not quite as scary. So I think Baltimore is going to have a chance to get back on track, and it's going to be behind letting Lamar do his thing. So I'm very bullish on Lamar Jackson. For me, I think he's got a chance at QB1 overall season. You're getting him QB4.
I have come full circle. Again, I don't ever dig in my heels on takes. I was not a big Lamar guy coming out, but I've seen the upside and the major potential in Lamar, and I think people have just kind of soured on him. He didn't have the great follow-up to his MVP season last year. He had some injuries, and everything just didn't go perfect the way that it should. But let me hit you with a little would you rather. So you a ton of startups. Forget best ball for a second. Let's just talk Dynasty. You're on the clock, both players on the board. Do you want Lamar or Kyler Murray?
That's a tough one for me. I'm probably going to go Lamar just because I think Kyler Murray also, you could make an argument, has, league-winning ability because he's got that rushing ability. He's a tremendous player. I just worry about the size. I mean, he's a little smaller, so I would kind of let that be, my tiebreaker there. So I would go with Lamar ahead of Kyler Murray if we're doing a startup.
For me, it's not even close. I'm taking Lamar all day, every day, twice on Sunday. Easy. 100% easy. I'm always going to lean to, like, the team guy. All things being equal. Let me ask you a tougher one right now. Lamar Jackson or Joe Burrow?
That's tough. Burrow's in a great situation. I just think that the rushing ability of Lamar, like Lamar's peak season to me, is going to be ahead of a peak season for Burrow. For Burrow to have a peak season, we're going to need to see him, throw for a tremendous amount of passing touchdowns. I think Lamar, he could just go nuclear rushing the football and be efficient as a passer, and I think his ceiling is a little higher. So that's a tough one, but I'm going to lean Lamar on that one as well. How about yourself?
Again, very, very close. I think that I think just people in general forget Dynasty, just anything. the most recent movie that you saw that was really great, like everybody loved Top Gun Maverick. Oh, it was the greatest movie I've seen in years. I mean, it was good, but was it really the greatest movie you've seen? But it's just the most entertaining, enjoyable movie that you've seen in the last business quarter or the last half year, which makes it really stick out. And I think as Dynasty and fantasy gamers, we just really remember those last two games of the fantasy playoffs, week 16 and 17, when Joe Burrow won everybody a lot of cash. He had a 38-point game. He had a 35-point game. But I think we tend to forget about the weeks from week 9, 9, 11, 12, and 13, where he didn't score more than 16 points. Is Zach Taylor and the coaching staff going to continue to open up that offense? Are they going to continue to see more of that? And maybe they do. But I just know that week in, week out, I always have a safer floor with Lamar Jackson. I just think I get a better floor and a better ceiling just based off his wheels. If he runs for 60 yards, that's an extra touchdown. And if you get 4 points per passing touchdown, that's a touchdown and a half. So for me, it's pretty clearly Lamar, but you gotta lean toward. It's close. They're both in my top 8, so we're splitting hairs. I just wanted to see how dug in you were on that take. Now I have one more. I'll hit you with a couple of my other ones from last week. I can't quit. I don't have that. I don't have that sound drop. I don't have that, Brokeback Mountain. I wish I knew how to quit you. So the best I got.
Hey now.
I'll give you a hey now. Is Danny Dimes. I think Danny Dimes has a really good bounce back season and will flirt with being a QB1. I think he'll finish somewhere between QB 10 and QB 14 on the season. And part of it's Brian Daboll. And I don't believe that Danny Dimes is the level of athlete of Josh Allen, but I also believe Danny Dimes is a better athlete than people give him credit for. What this guy needs to do is really just stay healthy. He had like a head and neck thing last year that he's since been cleared of. He had some hamstring issues, which as a guy who has a good rushing ability in his own right, I think that he could be a lot better served in this Brian Daboll offense. And let me ask you a question. You did really good on the random question I asked you earlier. Now, how much bigger of an athlete? I didn't say better and tools, but how much bigger of a man do you think Josh Allen is than Danny Dimes?
I mean, he's bigger, but Danny Dimes is a large quarterback. I mean, his frame is good, and athletically he's up there. I mean, if we're talking about like 40 time and measurables, like Daniel Jones.
No, just give me height and weight. What do you think their height and weight are? Who's taller? Who's heavier? And by how much?
I'll say Josh Allen by 10 pounds in terms of weight, and I'll say Josh Allen by an inch.
They're both 6'5". Daniel Jones listed at 220, Josh Allen 237. Now I get it. I'm not saying that Danny Dimes is gonna springboard up and all of a sudden become Josh Allen. That's don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm just saying that he is a good sized man who's got good wheels of his own right. There are plenty of pass catchers there. I don't think there's an elite one. I would have loved to, obviously, for them to have brought in a Stephon Diggs type. But Danny Dimes is the kind of guy, if I could get him as my QB3, if someone's really soured on him, if maybe he's on a rebuilding roster in Dynasty, I'll give you Kenny Pickett for Danny Dimes. I'm just going to bet on the athlete. I'm going to bet on the athlete more than I'm going to bet on the rookie. Now, does that mean that Kenny Pickett's going to be bad? No. But if he was taken to 20th overall, do they have to get him on the field? Does he have to supplant Mitch Trubisky? Maybe. I just think Danny Dimes, and if things are going well, it could be a short-term flip. So for me, I like Danny Dimes. I like the athlete. I like the sneaky Konami code. What do you think about Danny Dimes, and where are you seeing him go in the best ball startups that you're doing right now? You're doing a lot of super flex. I know that Underdog is added as super flex.
So I have not really been doing as many of the super flex of best balls, but I know that Danny Dimes is interesting because a lot of people like doing giant stacks because giant stacks are cheap and none of their wide receivers are getting pushed up that high. So like Danny Dimes is kind of been an interesting like QB2 in like some of these underdogs. Right now, Danny Dimes is quarterback 22. So, based on, your 10 to 14, that would be a big win.
Give me the two above and the two below. So if he's 22, who's what, 20 and 21?
Jameis at quarterback 20, Matt Ryan at quarterback 21.
Okay.
And then right below him is Zach Wilson and Ryan Tannehill. So I think if you took that group, I would say Danny Dimes definitely has the highest ceiling. I don't see Matt Ryan or Jameis Winston. You can make a case for Zach Wilson making a big step forward, but
I would agree.
Jones would kind of be the highest ceiling guy in that group.
But by the way,
Wilson.
Little segue, I'll get your opinion on this. Zach Wilson, another guy that I'm really intrigued by in Dynasty, because I don't think people always put the two and two together, that Zach Wilson, his offensive coordinator, Mike LaFleur, not to be confused with his brother Matt LaFleur, or the great from the all-time movie Dodgeball, Peter LaFleur, but they all come from that Sean McVay coaching tree, which is a derivative of the Kyle Shanahan coaching tree, which is this is all very trickle down from Mike Shanahan. And this is year 2. And if you look at year 2 in that offense, so many guys have had their best career year in year 2 of that system, whether that be Aaron Rodgers, whether that be Matt Ryan. So many guys, when they move over to that Shanahan offense, Jimmy Garoppolo, another guy who had a big year in that offense. I could really see Zach Wilson. I mean, the boom, kind of like Danny Dimes, the boom bust is there. I mean, they've invested in the skill position. I think Zach Wilson's a sneaky guy with upside for both best ball and Dynasty. Thoughts on Zach Wilson?
I completely agree with you, and I think that like the Breece Hall and the Garrett Wilson additions, everybody talks about them. But and I know that this offense, the tight end is very important, and they brought in 3 tight ends. I'm
going like 2.5 because you got CJ Uzoma and Tyler Conklin, and then a rookie that I really like in Jeremy Ruckert.
Yeah, so Jeremy Ruckert's interesting because he's a local guy, and the Jets drafted him. He's from Long Island, where I live, so there's like a little hype on him. But the Conklin is getting great reports out of camp, where it kind of looked like, it would be more like a tight end by committee. Conklin might kind of take that. But it's just the sum of the parts. They're doing everything they can to put him in a position to succeed. And I think that, the pressure's on Wilson, but all he's got to do is make the proper reads and take the next step forward, because the talent is there. I mean, we love the wide receivers there. We didn't even bring up Corey Davis. So he'll have 3 wide receivers that are capable, deep at tight end. And then, we love Breece Hall, and Michael Carter's shown that he can play in this league as well. So he's got weapons galore.
And I'm just hurt that you didn't bring up Braxton Berrios.
Braxton
Berrios buried me. He buried me in a final of a league that I really wanted to win. It's an old school. I guess we're all old heads at this point, like Dynasty Podcasters League with, the Dynasty Happy Hour guys and the Dynasty Trade Calculator guys and the Dynasty Nerds, just some of those old. And I really wanted that championship. And goddamned Braxton Berrios was on Pete Davidson's roster, and he got me. And I will always prop up. I will give Braxton Berrios his flowers, and I was a little disappointed that you didn't.
Well, shout out to Dan Williamson, our boy from the GOAT District. Dan won a big league with Braxton Berrios as his waiver wire pickup and flex play. So you weren't the only one to kind of suffer. Whoever Dan was playing suffered that week as well. Berrios can play. I should have brought him up, and it just goes to show you you got to like what they're doing with that offense. They're bringing in guys, and they're just putting them in a position to succeed. So he's super interesting.
And that's why that Jets offense is low-key interesting from both a dynasty and a best ball redraft standpoint, is the defense is still not going to be great. So the offense, you're in a division with Miami, which should be improved. They're in a division with Buffalo, one of the best offenses in the league. Uncle Bill's going to whoop up on them twice a year. That's just what Belichick does. But I think there's some upside there. I didn't mean to steer the ship that way, but it was just good conversation. Give us one more. Give us one more good hot take.
So I'm going to go with Tua does just enough and takes a big step forward and keeps his job for next season. I think that he's got, like we talk about Zach Wilson having pressure to perform. I think Tua might have the most pressure of any quarterback right now to perform. They went out and got Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle's there, Cedric Wilson. They re-signed Gesicki. They go out and get 100 running backs. He's got a new head coach. I think that they're saying everything they can. I think that they really, really want to see Tua succeed. And I think they're going to put him in a position to do so. I think Miami is actually going to have a nice season. I think they're going to challenge for a playoff berth. And I think Tua is going to keep his job heading into next year. If I had to give you a quarterback finish, I'd say he has a chance at somewhere around, quarterback 16-ish, just based on getting the ball into the hands of those two wide receivers. I think Waddle is kind of underrated right now because I think a lot of people are scared off of Waddle, but I think he's an elite talent. And I think he'll be able to coexist with Tyreek Hill. So all Tua's got to do is just get the ball to the right people. And I think he'll do just enough as like a game manager to keep his job heading into next year.
Man, I hate to argue with guests, but there is no one I want less of in any format than Tua. He got hurt, and that's what he does. First of all, that's part of the reason why he's missed games every year. What is this, his third year in the league? Third year in the league, going back to college. He's missed multiple games, 4 years in a row? He's 6'1", 215 pounds. He thinks he's more mobile than he is. My thing with Tua is that once he came back and played healthy the back half of the year, he averaged 12.6 points. So literally from week 10 through week 18, he never scored more than 17.9 fantasy points. I love the addition of Tyreek Hill. I like the fact that the head coach that hated him is gone because the head coach last year, Brian Flores, clearly hated Tua. It was pretty obvious. And just for me, I can't get there. I think he could even have a good season, and if they don't make the playoffs, I think he's gone. I really do. Miami's got the draft capital next year to go out and kind of, move on from him. So for me, I just can't get behind Tua. I just can't. Too many good defenses in that division, and I just don't think he's that guy. I think we want him to be. He went to Alabama, won a national championship, but I don't know, man. Do those things concern you, like the injuries and?
Oh no, absolutely. But this is bold take, and we're in the war zone with our bold takes. And my bold take is Tua's going to do just enough to keep that job. And I agree, he has limitations, but I think that I believe in Mike McDaniel stylistically. I think that they're going to be a yak generated offense, and I think that those wide receivers are good enough to go with Gesicki. That I think that there's just enough talent on that offense, and I think that it's a bright enough head coach that they'll maximize them. And we'll know really quickly, because like you said, if we don't see a Tua take a step forward, I think that he's absolutely gone. And I think that there's a chance that if he really struggles, you could see him get benched this year. But I think that I'm betting on just enough this offseason. But I agree with you. There are a lot of red flags and some serious risks in investing in him in like Dynasty. But strictly for redraft, I think that he could end up paying off as a QB2 this year if it all goes right.
Well, man, I know this, and I've always owned my misses as a Dynasty and fantasy. If Tua hits, I don't know what wine pairs well with Crow, but I'll be eating a lot of it if Tua hits. So another one that I had, I tell you, I'm also down on Mac Jones. I mentioned this. I think he finishes, I said last week, back 24 at the QB position. That may have been a tad too hot, but more like maybe like 22. But I think it's going to be a real rough year for Mac Jones. What are your thoughts on Mac going into 2022? I like the guy. I like the grit. I don't love the offense. I don't love the division. I don't love Matt Patricia. Speaking of guys who are fake sharp, we call Cleveland fake sharp. I know the guy's like an astrophysicist or like a like a literal genius, like his IQ is that of a genius. But when you have a pencil behind your ear and you're operating on a laminated piece of paper, I have to ask questions. Where are you at with old mac and cheese?
I'm not high on him at all. I think that he's like a game manager. I don't think he's an impactful fantasy player. I think that they'll do everything they can to run the ball, and I just don't think he gives you that upside. He doesn't offer any scrambling ability. We don't love his weapons, and I don't love a second-year quarterback changing offensive coordinators. So, like, I get it. He won some games last year. They made the playoffs. But I agree with you. I think that, if you have a chance, like Memphis has brought up, like Zach Wilson, I think like you could potentially trade a Mac Jones for a Zach Wilson plus in so many leagues and get something on top of Zach Wilson with a higher upside guy. I think that might be a good way to play it, because I just see him being like the kind of guy that if you're in a redraft league and it's a bye week and you need to add a QB, you're never going to ever want to start Mac Jones. And I don't think he offers you a whole lot of upside as your QB2 in a super flex either. So I'm with you. I'm not a huge Mac Jones guy. I think he could start in the league a long time, but I think he's kind of just a guy.
I think he's Kirk Cousins without the weapons. I mean, and quite frankly, the offensive coordinator, or Derek Carr is another guy. I would much rather have those guys. I mean, you look around Derek Carr and you see Devontae Adams. We talked about him earlier. Adams, Waller, Renfro. You mentioned Kenyon Drake, Josh Jacobs. I really like rookie Zamir White. That's a good offense. We look at Kirk Cousins. You got Adam Thielen, who I think is an absolute steal. I'd like to welcome the rest of the Dynasty and fantasy world to the party. We've been talking about him since March, but welcome back. Love that, man. Adam Thielen. Obviously, Justin Jefferson goes without saying. Can this be the year Irv Smith stays healthy? I know your guy Matt Kelly there at Roto Underworld and Player Profiler. He's a big Amir Smith Marset guy. KJ Osborne, Dalvin Cook goes without saying what a talent he is. And then look at Mac Jones. I mean, Tyquan Thornton. Maybe you can squeeze a year out of Devontae Parker. I mean, Hunter Henry I like, but Jonnu Smith's never done anything. Sorry, Jonnu Smith, athleticism truthers. He's never done nothing. Nothing to get me warm and fuzzy. I mean, Kendrick Bourne, Jacoby Myers is okay. I mean, if you're looking for a flyer, but just look around and I'm like, where's the pizzazz? What should I be excited about? Who's going to help Mac get to the Kirk Cousins level? That's what we're trying to get to, is the Kirk Cousins level.
Yeah, and I mean, they were rumored during the draft to be a team that might be trying to get, a Williams or a Wilson type talent, and it just didn't happen. And then they reached for Thornton, who I've come around on in terms of, like, I'm not as negative on him as some, but I mean, that can't be your main addition. It's a weird situation. They don't really have weapons. We all love their head coach. We like their defense, but at the end of the day, there's just not a whole lot there. Like, if you put Kirk Cousins on New England this year, I wouldn't like Kirk Cousins either. Like, it's just a bad set of weapons over there in New England.
I'm not, and that's exactly right. When you and I, like, I'll go back to your Derek Carr take. When you and I value the Derek Carrs and Kirk Cousins of the world, well, what are we getting? We're getting divisions where they're going to have to score. We're getting two guys who play in domes. We're getting two guys that have good offensive weapons. What am I getting, with Mac Jones? I'm getting a guy that plays in New England, so there's a good chance from November through the fantasy playoffs. Remember the Buffalo game last year where he had like half a point of fantasy production? And I had someone tell me, well, but Memphis, that's an anomaly. I'm like, is he moving? Is the New England Patriots relocating to like San Antonio? Something I haven't heard? Because if they're not, the repeat of that weather in New York with the Jets twice, Buffalo twice, New England 8 to 9 games a year, depends on which year it is. It's like there's a lot of that potential. And I just see this being, I think Bill Belichick, he is a genius. Speaking of true geniuses, he is a genius, but he likes to zig where the rest of the NFL zags. And everybody else is out here high flying, stacking weapons. And I think Bill's going to be like, run the ball and play defense, 3 yards in a cloud of dust with Ramondre Stevenson and Damian Harrison. I just don't think it reeks of dynasty or fantasy success.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just Belichick is so funny. I mean, the draft he put together was just so weird. If you just look at it on a piece of paper, you're like, Belichick is just getting out there in terms of what he's doing. They had all this money to spend the last 2 years, and they don't go out and get a proper alpha or anything really too
and they
exciting.
were on the market, and the alphas
Yeah.
were on the market. You have the money, you have the thing, you have the rookie QB on the rookie contract. Now, there's one last guy I want to ask you about. I'll get you the hell out of here so you can go on about your evening. But Trevor Lawrence, I'm gonna hit you out of nowhere with Trevor Lawrence. Where are you at with him as a dynasty asset?
So I've heard you and Jerry talk about Trevor Lawrence. I think that Trevor Lawrence is going to be the kind of guy that you don't mind having on your dynasty rosters. But I think right now, if you look at where he's going in startups right now, he's a sell for me, because I think
What is it, like 8-10, 8-10, 12, somewhere in that range?
I would guess. I know that like in Superflex startups, I've seen him go like early second round.
He's 11 per Fantasy Pros. I went back to the Fantasy Pros. I apologize. I should be using Roto Underworld Player Profiler in honor of my guest. That just popped in my head, but I think that'd be pretty close to consensus, whether you use Roto Underworld, Nerds, Fantasy Pros. I think 10. That's what I said. 10 to 12. That's kind of where I thought he would be.
Yeah, like I think that he's going to end up being a decent quarterback. But I just think that we had higher hopes for him in terms of fantasy. At least I did, coming into the draft as a rookie. I do think that they've added a lot of speed on that offense, where we can pan the signings they made based on the contracts. But when they get Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, Zay Jones, he'll have Travis Etienne. There's going to be more team speed and a head coach that's a kind of like get him back on track with Peterson. I think they'll get the culture right there. But I just think at the end of the day, I'm not overwhelmingly bullish on him. I think there's better ways that dynasty players could be using that, that early second round pick, even in a super flex, than thinking Trevor Lawrence is going to take this, huge step forward. I don't know how many top 5 seasons he'll have at all in his career. And I think coming into the league, he would have been a guy that people would have bet on to have top 5 seasons. So for me, you can still sell him as an elite asset, and I don't necessarily view him as that.
I think he's a guy that for his career, because he is mobile, but he's not a rusher. He's not Josh Allen. He's clearly not a Lamar. He's more mobile than we think. I really do believe that Doug Peterson will get the most out of him. I don't trust Trent Baalke, the GM. I don't trust Shad Khan, the owner. Again, we talked about Baker earlier and, Cleveland being pseudo sharp. I don't trust Jacksonville to get it right. But there was a time about a half a decade ago where I wouldn't have trusted the Buffalo Bills to have gotten it right, and they have. I just know this. I know that he's extremely talented. But if you go back and you look at a guy like Kirk Cousins, who or Derek Carr is another guy, for the last half decade, when they're healthy and play all the games, these guys consistently finish in that QB 7 to QB 12 range. Well, if that's all I'm chasing is that QB 7 to 12 range as like possible best case scenario outcome, why wouldn't I go get Kirk Cousins for 2 or 3 more years and all the plus that I would get for moving Trevor Lawrence? I think sometimes we lose the fact that dynasty and fantasy in general is about points. And if a QB, forget his name, John Smith, I don't care. If a guy's going to give me QB 7 to 12 range, and I can get a much better wide receiver or running back at the cost I'm getting Trevor Lawrence, and then wait a few rounds and get Kirk Cousins, then I'm going to be points ahead, because that wide receiver or running back that I get in the top of round 2, as you just mentioned, is going to be way better than the running back or wide receiver I'm going to get in like round 5 or 6 of a Superflex startup where I get Kirk Cousins. So for me, it's just a points total. It's nothing against the guy. It's where does he max out versus what does he give me long term.
Yeah, and also like we play Dynasty, but the goal of Dynasty is not to like continually hold, strong young assets. The goal of Dynasty is to take down your league every now and then, if not,
Well,
every.
that's how you and I play. There's a lot of people who just want to have this sexy looking roster with name cachet. I like winning. I like money. I like titles. I think you do too.
I enjoy a rebuild as well. Don't get me wrong. I mean, we all enjoy that. But at the end of the day, it's like you got to bank these points. And Trevor Lawrence, like you bring up, like Derek Carr or Kirk Cousins, I think that those guys are cheaper, and I think that they've got a chance at a QB1 season this year. Trevor Lawrence, a lot would have to happen right for him to take that big step. So points matter, like you said, and you can go out and you can trade Trevor Lawrence for. You could play it two ways. You could go get him for another young quarterback and plus a ton of assets, or you could get a veteran quarterback plus some assets. Because I think that the community really loves the idea of Lawrence, but like you said, it's hard for me to see him just get into that elite tier. And I think that's what he's worth right now in terms of trade value.
Yep, we're in agreement. Well, man, listen, when's your next article coming out? A couple of weeks, a month? What are you writing on? I know, like normally on Tuesdays you're doing the GOAT District with Dan and JD, the podcast, but just give us the rundown of what's going on in your content creation world.
So we had Jared Smola from Draft Sharks on last night, who's a really sharp guy. You can go check that out on GOAT District. My next two articles coming out on Player Profiler will be a draft review that I was in with Dan, Dwayne McFarland, a number of Fantasy Mojo was in that draft. It was like a 12-team football guys FFPC league that was invitation only, and it was really, really tough draft. So I did a write-up of that. And then I have my 0 RB, hero RB, later round running back candidates coming up. And I'll have written content all throughout the summer, and then I write the waiver wire article that comes out on Tuesdays over on Player Profiler. That'll be my weekly article. So check me out at the OG Fantasy. Check us out at the GOAT District. And this was a blast. I really appreciate you having me on. And yeah, man, I love the WarZone.
Well, we really appreciate you coming on. And like I said, I'm speaking on behalf of Jerry. I reached out to you on Monday as we record this on a Tuesday for a Wednesday podcast, and you were like, yeah, absolutely, would love to jump on and help you out. So I really appreciate it. A lot of good stuff. I know that Best Ball is really catchy. I know that PFF is really pushing it. I know that obviously Roto Underworld is really pushing it, and it's becoming a much bigger format. I'm telling you, gang, I'm not a Best Ball guy, but even doctors need doctors. And if you're looking for best ball content, if you're going to dip a toe in the puppy or whatever in the blue hell they're doing over at Underdog, I know they have a promo code over at the GOAT District too. You know the promo code, top of your head? Give them a shout.
The promo code is District. And you can also hit me up in the DMs. We can give you an FFPC promo code as well.
So they got all kinds of promos. So if you're best balling, and that's what these guys do, you got to check these guys out. Go into it with an edge. I can't help you with that because it's just not something that I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about Dynasty fantasy football. Not that these guys aren't, but I think they're some of the sharpest best ball minds out there. So make sure you go to YouTube, you go to Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever the blue hell you listen to podcasts or watch YouTube. I guess that'd be YouTube, and search GOAT District. Give these guys a follow. Follow Theo on Twitter. He's always posting mock drafts and real drafts. And you can see where guys who are putting big money on the line are drafting in both Dynasty and Best Ball. That'll give you a real accurate portrayal of where the sharps are taking some of your favorite players and players that you have questions on. As always, please head over to any of those same places. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. What do I like to say? You can find us everywhere but TikTok because, well, fuck TikTok because I'm an old man and nobody wants to see me on TikTok anyway. But check us out on YouTube. Check us out on podcast everywhere, Twitter, Instagram, everywhere, Dynasty WarZone. Subscribe, and if you want to support us other ways, the Patreon's there, and we'll be here next week with more shows. So on behalf of Theo, my name is Memphis. You can follow me at DWZ Memphis. You can follow him at the OG Fantasy. And remember, here at the Dynasty WarZone, We're just here to make the world a better place for fantasy football. Talk to you soon. Have a great week, guys.